ready for deployment.
I can smell the chemicals. I can smell the chemicals. Wings up high, they spray. Condensation trails, they say. But it seems to me poison in the air we breathe. Floating lines up there, chemical whispers everywhere. Clouds of doubt we see, tell me what it means to be. Chemtrails in the sky.
And good afternoon, fans of Steel News. It is Tuesday, a little after 2 o'clock. We are starting about an hour late today. We had some pending business with the Department of Justice that got rescheduled, but we will live to fight another day. We'll be meeting with those folks tomorrow. But today we're going to be talking about geoengineering, because there comes a moment in every nation when the truth can no longer be buried under these policy papers of these policy wonks, all the manipulated data, or the bureaucratic silence. You know how they just love to ignore us in DC when we state the obvious, the crimes against humanity. Well, today it's one of those moments, because what we're now seeing unfold in federal court is not just another lawsuit. It is a direct challenge to the foundation of what we've all been told to believe about our environment, our climate, and the data used to justify massive policy decisions that affect every one of our lives. A federal whistleblower, who also happens to be an atmospheric scientist, has stepped forward and said something very simple and very dangerous. The data may not be real. Let me say that again. The data may not be real. That it may have actually been altered, manipulated, even destroyed to support predetermined outcomes. Can you imagine our government doing such a thing? Well, if the data is compromised and the policies are compromised, if the policies are compromised, then the authority behind them is also compromised. And that brings us to the real question. Who gave them the authority in the first place? Because the last time I checked, the air above your home, my home, the skies above our state here in Florida. I'm speaking from Florida because we have a bill, a law that passed that said you can't geoengineer. Well, those skies don't belong to the unelected agencies, the foreign interest, or the private contractors operating behind closed doors. They belong to the people. And yet, what we are seeing is a system where decisions are being made, programs are being funded, and possibly operations are being conducted without our consent, without transparency, and without lawful accountability. Folks, this isn't governance. This is total control of everything in our lives, but most importantly, the air we breathe, the land we walk on, and the water that we drink. And this is why what I've been proposing and what we're going to be talking about tonight is so critical. The establishment of a public environmental trust, the lawful reclamation of state-controlled airspace, and of course, the restoration of sovereign authority back to the people. Because if we don't define the ownership, somebody else already has, and they're going to continue. Joining us today is a gentleman that I have the opportunity to interview. I'm very excited about Blake Horwitz. He is a man who is not speaking in just theories, but actually in law. He's a federal trial attorney with over 30 years of experience handling complex constitutional high-stakes litigation in federal court. He's been a part of some of the most significant legal battles in the country, including major misconduct, civil rights cases, and now he's part of the legal team behind what may become one of the most consequential cases involving environmental policy and scientific integrity in modern history. The case is Mabie versus United States, a whistleblower lawsuit alleging manipulation and destruction of weather data and raising serious questions about geoengineering practices and federal oversight. Blake, it is a pleasure to have you with me today. Thank you so much for joining us. And this is a big topic because every time I walk outside my house in the morning, I look up and there's the X. It's as if they mark my house every time because they know I'm calling them out. Blake, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
That's okay. Yep, got you loud and clear.
We're very excited to represent Justin Mabie. He is an atmospheric scientist, and he's really somebody who's in the middle of it all. He worked at the University of Colorado, which had a partnership, a federal partnership with NOAA, where billions of dollars are spent, much of it in atmospheric testing, and in programs that a lot of us don't want to talk about. And so at the end of the day, by being in the middle of it all, he was what's called a record custodian or a steward. It's actually a pretty technical term in the science jargon, but generally speaking, he's somebody that was responsible for taking care of our records for the world, for the United Nations and the United States as it related to weather. And what he noticed was that the weather data was being destroyed in violation of a number of laws, specifically the Federal Record Keeping Act. And by destroying the records, it made it extremely difficult for anybody to have access to that which is crucial. Now,
Right.
as you know, as you mentioned in Florida, the skies are being painted, and they want to get us used to the notion that the skies aren't our skies. Our kids are not going to be able to remember. Our kids aren't even going to know that there's this thing called the blue sky. We're going to, we're a little older than our kids, so we might go first. And the consequence is they get used to it. They're looking at their phones all day. And then there's going to be an evolution. And the evolution is, or what they want, is for there to be an evolution where kids don't really know what a blue sky is.
That's right.
Yeah. So
that's exactly. Go ahead.
He was able to uncover that. And that's in part what our lawsuit is about, in that he was retaliated against by uncovering this information.
Well, the problem is we have allowed this to continue for a long time. I remember as a child looking up with my father, who was a former test pilot in the U.S. Army Air Corps, and he used to say, "Oh, darn it, this is a," he said, the planes taken out of JFK and LaGuardia and Newark, they're mucking up the skies with the contrails again. It turns out it wasn't contrails; they were chemtrails, because you could see some that had condensation that disappeared shortly after the plane passed by, and others continued to widen and spread. And that was really the first time that I became acquainted with this concept. I've addressed this over the years with various people. And today, I think a lot of people are very hip to the fact that, yes, the government is experimenting on us. I'm sitting in front of a stack of papers right here that are, essential articles that I think would be very supportive to this discussion, because this one talks about President Trump opening the door to planet hacking geoengineering experiments, and it was published back in April of 26 of this, just a couple of days ago. And it talks about a geoengineering advocate entering the Trump administration planning to spray sun-reflecting chemicals into the atmosphere. And it highlights that under the Trump administration, enthusiasm appears to be growing for the controversial technology of solar geoengineering, aiming to spray sulfate particles into the atmosphere to reflect sun's radiation back to space and decrease the temperature on Earth. And in fact, David Schneier, who is the architect of Trump's Environmental Protection Agency transition, has lobbied the U.S. government and testified in the Senate in favor of federal support of geoengineering. So we have conflicting people in an administration that arguably has been looking to deregulate and eliminate agency government. He was going to start with the Department of Education, yet that still persists. So, with Justin coming forward and getting whistleblower protection, I want to start with how serious is it that his life potentially is in danger with what he has in terms of data to prove that this has been experimenting on humans, despite the fact this flies in the face of 50 USC 1520A.
Well, I want to say something off the cuff. Justin is working in the executive branch. Justin is working for Bobby Kennedy.
Great.
So it's fascinating you mentioned that. I have not seen this article you just mentioned, but we have some conflicting people. Justin is a scientist. When I say scientist, he's a no BS scientist, somebody that requires actual science and data in order to draw conclusions versus drawing political conclusions. So anybody who's an advocate, like you just mentioned, that gentleman is not a scientist. That person is an advocate for a position, and probably an advocate for a financial position for people that give him money, because no scientist would advocate for this. No true scientist would be an advocate for this position, because the science it's readily established that the science is uncertain.
Correct. That is correct. Yeah. With respect to the data that have alleged to have been manipulated or destroyed, what specific data can Justin point to that has been manipulated or destroyed, allegedly?
Well, there's one that's not allegedly. So by allegedly, what we mean as lawyers is we mean that it's put in a complaint. That's what and then everybody uses the term allegedly now to mean something in non-legal vernacular. But we have a scenario where there was an actual whistleblower some time ago with regards to a guy by the name of Tom Carl. So Tom Carl was an individual who was a senior person for NOAA, and he put together a paper, right, that was designed to show that the world tends to be warming. It's warming faster than we thought. Mm-hmm. The intention of this paper was to support the notion that we should get into the Paris Climate Accords. So there's a scientist that the United States had who worked for the United States, who worked for NOAA. NOAA is part of the United States executive branch, or the federal branch. And he puts together a paper, and the paper says, yep, all the evidence shows that we tend to be warming faster than we want to. Ergo, let's jump into the Paris Climate Accords. The problem is that the work that he did, similar to Hillary Clinton's story, the work that he did was on his own laptop. He prints it out, submits the paper, all of his data, the supporting data, was destroyed, meaning his laptop fails, all his evidence is gone, everything that he did to put together this extremely important paper was destroyed. NOAA scientists, essentially, after that, the NOAA scientists that worked with him, right, he's the boss, and the NOAA scientists said, we can't support your paper. We're not going to peer review it. We're not even going to dig into it. We can do nothing with this because you can't show us any of the supporting data, which demonstrates that there's any legitimacy to the position that the world is tending to get warmer. So we're not going to accept it. So he then went and found other scientists in what's called peer review, which you may know about is, find a bucket of people that you can pay, and now you're peer reviewed. And then that was used to enter the Paris Climate Accords. So that was some time ago. That's a first example of well-defined evidence of the historical evidence that was destroyed, then used for a monumental purpose for the United States. Beyond that, in 2015, there was historical data that Justin was a steward of. That historical data was ordered to be destroyed, thrown away. Very complex data. To get into historical weather data is another show about how complex it is to talk about historical weather data. That was destroyed. Justin writes a paper explaining to his supervisor, you cannot be throwing this stuff away. This stuff can never be recreated again. Then in 2018, there was a huge data move where data was moved from one location in Colorado to another location in North Carolina. During that data move, more data was destroyed. And again, maintaining weather data is extremely complex because it was, a small example is weather data, historical weather data was created at the time. So imagine what historical weather data would look like in 1899. In 1901, and how, you have a book over here and you have a little legend and explains things and the maps and everything that would be used at the time in order to explain a complex scenario back in 1901 with the type of science they used back then on paper that can be destroyed, things of that nature, meaning paper that can break down and decompose over time. So at the end of the day, my point is, without getting into the minutia, a lot of those documents were destroyed. How is it that we determine what the historical weather record was? Well, it's not by using computers and it's not through AI. It's by looking at the actual data. You got to look at the actual data to determine what it was. So now if we want to figure out what the historical weather data was, if we want to figure out, well, is it true based upon the measurements they were taking at the time that the world is actually warming up? And now we should be making some cataclysmic decisions, like we should start painting our sky, putting chemicals in it, put stuff in to block the sun, like a bad movie. Should we be doing that? Well, do we have enough evidence to establish that there's actually what's called an anthropogenic or a man-made change in the weather, or is it natural? In other words, does the world go through cycles? And it does, with regards to warming and cooling. So those are the questions that one should be, and that's the general analysis.
Fascinating. So let's talk about what makes the case that you are bringing with several other law firms a first of its kind, because again, people are furious at this and they're talking to their state reps, they're talking to their congressmen, senators, and a lot of, including some governors are sort of like, well, I'll have my staffer look into it. They act as if they have no clue about what their constituents are talking about. Yet I'm sure they look up and see the same nonsense in the skies that we do. And I can't imagine why they're not concerned about their children, their grandchildren, the future of this country, et cetera. After all, they swore an oath to the Constitution. If that means anything to these people anymore. So how does this case, as a first of its kind, intend to, or should I say, what makes this a case for the first of its kind?
Well, in the first instance, it is a whistleblower case, and a whistleblower case is designed to blow the whistle. And what I mean by that is it's designed to expose corruption. There are many statutes that have been passed that have the intention of exposing corruption. And this particular statute involved in this case, which is 4712 of the federal statutes, this is designed to expose corruption with regards to waste, fraud, and abuse. That's the general paradigm. And the corruption this is designed to expose is that records are being destroyed for the purpose of creating a narrative that was really just convenient for the political times. So science is science. We all know that 1 + 1 = 2, and it doesn't equal 2.5. And if in this instance they want it to equal 2.5, then what they'll be doing is changing the historical record. Now the historical record shows it's really 2.5, meaning half a degree warmer or 1 or 2 degrees warmer than it should be. That's what the historical record demonstrates. And now let's paint the skies. So what this lawsuit does, and why the politicians that you mentioned cannot ignore it, is the lawsuit. It was painfully put together. People can look, you're looking now at the beginning of it, but if you look towards the middle and the end, you'll see that there are citations to all the research that's going on and the projects that have been undertaken by the federal government, patents that are owned by the federal government that are specifically designed to do one thing: change the weather, intervene on the weather, intervene on the climate. That's what the patents are for. Then you look at research projects that have been going on for many years, where hundreds of millions of dollars are spent. United States dollars are being put into techniques to intervene on the weather. Private companies, this is all in the complaint. Private businesses, some of them 501c3s, are giving money to universities for the purpose of seeing what could be done to intervene on the weather. Private companies are coming in and they're allowed to enter our airspace. They don't deny this. They're allowed to enter our airspace and go paint the skies. All they have to do is one thing. There's no prohibition. Just do one thing, and that is give NOAA 10 days notice. So,
And does NOAA have to give us notice, or is giving NOAA notice basically accepted to as if it's been told to the people of the United States?
well, NOAA has to report what it is that they received notice about.
Right.
And the present status is, just like any federal agency, I mean, it's not that we get the information, but the present status is that NOAA is very behind on their reporting. So the two
Right.
things that occur is NOAA is very behind on their reporting. And the second thing is NOAA doesn't govern anything. So people want to come in and pollute our airspace, and that's what it is. It's contamination that they're putting up to the airspace, pure, plain old contamination. If they want to do that, they can do it. And the only thing they have to do is give them 10 days notice. I analogize it to like somebody who owns a bank,
Mm-hmm.
and the vault is always open. They say, you know, I own the bank. Yeah, I get that. And the door's open. I'm leaving for the day. And then they
Right.
leave. People can come in and steal the money, do whatever they want. The United States in this instance isn't doing it, but they know that private actors are coming in, paid a lot of money, and they're doing it in this
Right.
in regards to this particular scenario, and that's just fine.
So when I look here at 50 U.S. Code 1520A, subsection 1520A, restrictions on the use of human subjects for testing of chemical or biological agents. In fact, I think I can pull that up here as well so that folks can see what that is. Let me see if I can find it. I had it here just a minute ago. Here it is. Let's get this up on the screen so we can all sort of read along here, because I think it's important for folks to see this. This is frankly coming right out of the U.S. Code, statutory over here, starting on the left side of the screen. But it's very clear that the Secretary of Defense may not conduct directly or by contract any test or experiment involving the use of a chemical agent or biological agent on civilian population, any other testing of a chemical agent or biological agent on human subjects, subject to the subsections C, D, and E, and the prohibition in subsection does not apply to a test or experiment carried out for any of the following purposes. And if you read through this, it's clear, and I'm going to flip to the next page here because I want everybody to kind of keep up with it here. But informed consent required. The Secretary of Defense may conduct a test or experiment described in subsection B only if informed consent to the testing was obtained from each human subject in advance of the testing on that subject. So by definition of 50 U.S. Code 1520A, would that not, Blake, then constitute violations of that code based on what you see happening, despite the fact they're sending it to NOAA and NOAA is defunct or behind in their reporting, as they are supposed to in Title 15 of the Commerce and Foreign Trade under Department of Commerce?
Well, no, I think this is talking about what the Secretary of Defense can do. So in other words, it's a loophole. Private enterprise is coming in to do it, not the Secretary of Defense.
Right. That's exactly right. That's
Yes.
exactly right. So the fact that they put all of these, sort of carve outs, if you will, I mean, this looks like a carve out because they don't have to report or pull NOAA up, or NOAA has to pull a permit under Title 15 under the Department of Commerce, Chapter 9, National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, Department of Commerce, Subchapter A, maintaining records and submitting reports on weather modification activities, Section 908.1, definitions. A person, any individual, corporation, company, association, firm, partnership, society, joint stock company, any state or local government, or any agency thereof, or any organization, whether commercial or nonprofit, except where acting solely as an employee, agent, or independent contractor of the federal government. So that is where their loophole is, right there in the Department of Commerce, Title 15.
Right. So,
And again, I just want to pause because I think the audience needs to comprehend, Blake, just how diabolical this is, that the federal government knows full and well that our skies are being poisoned every single day. These demons have children, they have grandchildren, but yet they probably worship something other than the Lord Almighty God, that is. They have a different God. And this to them is acceptable, knowing that they're killing people on the planet.
well, I'll say it a little differently. Not that I disagree with that paradigm, but like everything else, including the bad guy you just mentioned, which is somebody that whispers in our ear and confuses us, I think that what does occur is that there's an intentional obfuscation, just like with the vaccine, like with everything. There's an intentional obfuscation, and the obfuscation is that there's a idea, well, look, maybe if we're getting a little warm, maybe we can throw a little stuff up there and deflect the sun. Sounds like a plan. Sounds like a good idea. And so in some instance, in some way, I would perhaps give the benefit of the doubt. I don't want to say just because they're politicians that they're bad and that they're wrong, even though they're, in some instances, if they're ill-intended, one would think, or they're corrupt, or they have promises they got to keep and all that kind of thing with other people. But in this instance, my position is that just let the Earth be and do what is right for planet Earth, and let the Earth handle what it needs to handle and stop intervening. So it might mean that there are less airplane flights, and it might mean that we need to handle the Earth, like it should be handled. In other words, let nature do what nature does, like organic farming, regenerative farming, don't cut down trees, things of that nature. Don't have so many monocultures. You got so many monocultures, guess what happens? You got to throw silver iodide up, and you got to make rain, like in Montana and Idaho, where they're complaining now, for example, that the farmers are complaining there's not enough water, there's not enough rain. So they got to engage in weather modification on their flat lands because the sun's exposing their lands and there's no grasses. Anyways, I digress a bit, but that's part of the minutia that we need to understand.
Correct. And, Dane Wigington has put out this publication, Geoengineering, a Chronicle of the Indictment. It's a very quick read, but he argues that we have gone past the tipping point, Blake, with the geoengineering that's gone on for decades. And our weather now is screwed up. I can tell you, I live in Florida. I've lived here for over 40 years. And we don't get afternoon thunderstorms anymore. We haven't for years. It looks, it starts out a beautiful bluebird day. They start spraying, and the next thing you know, you get these little popcorn clouds, or it just hazes over. That acts like the contaminants in the air are basically damp rid boxes. For those that live in Florida, we all know what damp rid is. It's the box you put in your closet to keep the moisture from getting too high in your closet. It's like they're sucking the moisture out of the atmosphere, Blake, and we don't get rain. And our aquifers is now starting to show signs of stress, particularly in Miami-Dade County, where the saltwater intrusion is real because the fresh water underneath the limestone pushes out the salt water from on both sides of Florida. But because that water is receding inside our aquifer, salt water is starting to come in. One day, Miami-Dade folks are going to turn on their faucet, and it's going to be the ocean coming in through their house or apartment, wherever they live. So we need to really, this is such a massive landmark lawsuit. This particular person in the chat is asking, and I haven't read the lawsuit in its entirety, so I cannot answer this, but he says, why is this lawsuit for the so-called whistleblower does not include language forbidding geoengineering, only asking for compensation for his client? Is that, in fact, an accurate question?
Yeah, it's an accurate question. So we started a GeoFight 4 months ago, and this lawsuit is a comprehensive lawsuit that allows us and you and I to have this conversation and to expose what is going on. A lawsuit cannot necessarily solve all problems. So, for example, if we had a lawsuit on behalf of a group of people that were suffering from the things we're talking about, we may not have an instantaneous expert that's able to talk about everything as a plaintiff. And we have that in this case. So at the end of the day, my point is that this lawsuit is not intended to solve all problems. This is just the first lawsuit. Let me be clear. Okay. There's been other lawyers, other law firms that have been hired to sort of take care of business with regards to geoengineering, and no one's done it. This lawsuit, which we put together with a tremendous amount of work and effort, what is designed to blow the whistle and let everybody know and understand what is taking place. And it's taking off. In other words, a lot of people are learning about it. People are shocked about what's contained in the lawsuit. And it's a whistleblower lawsuit on behalf of an individual who worked for the University of Colorado. So that's what the lawsuit is. It's designed to blow the whistle and to explain what's going on.
Okay, so this is going to be the first of several, if not many, lawsuits. Fair enough. I agree. This has been my job for 10 years, is to get people to pay attention to certain subject matters that are vital to either national security, which would include our elections, and of course, something like the air we breathe. I would consider that a matter of national security, clearly. So what must be proven in court for this case to survive? And then sort of mount the next wave of litigation to continue to build on this?
What must be proven, quite simply, is that records were destroyed and that he retaliated. He was retaliated against as a result of blowing the whistle, and that the retaliation, it's legal jargon, but the retaliation ended up providing an adverse employment consequence. In other words, that they really did retaliate against him as a result of his blowing the whistle. So those are the elements, the general elements of an employment retaliation case.
So let's talk about the significance that you get from discovery, because from where I'm sitting, discovery really is what everybody is after. And a lot of times cases end in settlement or summary judgments, what have you, based on discovery, because the other side's realized the kimono's been opened and the shorts are down and they're now fully exposed. So let's talk about that. What do you think we can expect to see based on your whistleblower?
Well, let's pay attention to what we already did. What we did is we exposed everything in the beginning. So we're here right now because of the work we put into and the work that Justin Mabie put into with regards to this litigation. So let's assume the case gets dismissed tomorrow, just hypothetically. Look at the mountain information we put in. We established that the federal government, corporate enterprise, they are involved and foreign governments are involved in geoengineering.
Mm-hmm.
What other kind of wake-up call do we all need when the legislatures that you talked about? So put aside discovery for a moment. When the various legislatures from the various governments, the various state legislatures are talking and try to understand what's going on, all somebody needs to do is hand them this package or update the information if the hearing takes place next month, for example, in some state in Louisiana, for example, which I believe has something pending. I'm not sure exactly, but I actually testified in one of the hearings, and one of the legislators said, "We're going to look forward to your lawsuit." And this lawsuit contains just about everything up to a week ago with regards to what's going on in geoengineering, internationally, locally, and whatnot. So what we have already uncovered, what we've already dissected and brought forth is essential information. Discovery would establish the truth behind the admissions by the defense with regards to the weather data that was destroyed, and hopefully as well an admission by the United States government with regards to all the money they've been spending concerning the intervention as to geoengineering, the specific studies that have been done and projects that have been done with regards to the multi-millions of dollars that have been spent in this. So one thing that's important to know is that, we pay a ton, up to $1 billion a year goes to University of Colorado, for example. Okay, a lot of money. And
my alma mater, I'm going to add in there.
Well, I know it's a beautiful place in Boulder, but I'm sorry to say there's stuff that's going on that's not good.
So, you don't have to tell me. I graduated there a long time ago, but it has become a very hedonistic, demonic place. I hate to say it. It's terrible. They have still got a good aerospace program. My daughter graduated aerospace. She's a rocket engineer. She actually put the people around the moon. That was her project.
I'm sure they have good beer. Last time I was in Colorado, they had great beer and all that. But nevertheless, boy, I lost my train of thought.
I'm so sorry. You were talking about CU Boulder is very, is not the college it used to be. And this is where it's going on. So
the issue is that millions of dollars, up to $1 billion a year is spent. And what they provide for us relative to the research they're doing and the work they're doing is the most ambiguous statements. If you look at the citations that we have in the complaint, the recitation as to what they're doing when they spend extreme sums of money, they don't let us know. Like, you have to dig and dig and dig. So $2 million is given for this project, $5 million for that project, $10 million for this project. But what'd you guys come up with? What are you exactly doing? Are you researching, or are you throwing contaminants into the sky? For example, are you putting contaminants into the sky in what's called the stratosphere that will last for 2 years? It'll stay in the sky for 2 years. So you're looking now at some of the citations. We did our best to try to modify the language so that it would provide more explanation. But if we actually look at the research projects themselves, it's extremely difficult to understand where taxpayer money went. And this is essential information because if they're engaging in the various activities, it's for us to know about. So one of the great things here is that you can go to our website. You can download exactly what you have there. Our website is geofight.com. You can download that and you can study for yourself everything. You can look up everything and you can dig deeper, right? The American public, when they get an opportunity to consume information, they can come up with great things. So they can dig deeper and study. We've given everything to everybody. This is the whole kit and caboodle, at least what we could come up with. And so you can study deeper. You know, for example, putting aside what happens at the University of Colorado, look at the private companies that want to come in. We listed about 4 or 5 that want to come in and start contaminating our skies. Look at who's giving them money, who's supporting them. Look deeply into it. Issue FOIA requests. Find out more about how it is they're being funded, who's funding them. Because let's say tomorrow, for example, Trump says that we're cutting off funding. And by the way, it's important to know Donald Trump has cut off funding. They've cut a lot of funding to these institutions. And the funding that has cut has been funding with regards to geoengineering and climate modification. So that's important to know. Let's assume tomorrow the funding gets cut off. These private entities, we know what George Soros is up to, we know what Bill Gates is up to. These entities get funded, meaning private companies come in and then they start funding these universities so they can continue on. So the point is that this is an opportunity for everybody to start digging in. Don't just rely upon the lawyers. You have an opportunity to dig in and learn what's going on.
Okay, so how do we deal with the jurisdictional barriers, sort of the federal versus state argument? Because as we've proven, there's been multiple states who passed laws, Florida SB 56, to ban geoengineering, yet it still continues. So what are they and how do we deal with them?
So give me an example. So for example, the issue is that if they're going to contaminate our skies high in the airspace, how is it that the Florida government can send up some local military and go and capture an airplane? Is that the concept?
Well, I suppose that'd be one way to solve it, but I'm just saying, you know, the state has passed laws, and this Tennessee being the first to ban geoengineering and weather modification in their state. Florida did the same, but we didn't address the next rad radar or HARP. We just talked about actual contaminants, stratospheric aerosol injection, and other particulates being sprayed in the atmosphere. And they're continuing to do it, despite the fact we have a law that says you can't. So what are the jurisdictional concerns? Because that's a very important discussion when it comes to how do we keep these people from flying over our skies, even from Florida, even in the Gulf of Mexico, and having it blow over our skies based on the jet stream. And what do we do to stop it because the state ban isn't working?
No, it's that they're not doing anything. I just think that argument, that position is, I'm not saying what you're saying is nonsense. I'm saying that argument is nonsense.
I agree with you.
Yeah. So in other words, let's assume that somebody from Colombia drops off 100 pounds of cocaine and it ends up on the shore. And where it ended up on the shore, people had access to, and it contaminated someplace in Miami. So Florida can do nothing about it. So they just let it sit there, and they have the local police have no power to investigate anything. Let's assume the federal government's busy or they don't do anything. So therefore, if it continues to show up on our shore, the local agency for Florida cannot. In other words, a police agency for Florida can do nothing about that. What if somebody flies over 10,000 feet and sprays fentanyl onto cities in Florida? What do you do then? So they're 3,000 feet above the land and they just start spraying fentanyl. Federal government doesn't intervene, and Governor DeSantis is going to say, well, they're 3,000 feet above. We can't do anything about that. Or they're 5,000 feet above, or they're 10,000 feet above. Are you kidding me? So what happens is you track that airplane, and when it goes and lands, you go get them. I don't think there's any real issue there. State police.
I'm assuming we're able to do it with the military because flight radar now, they're turning off transponders. We're actually seeing that they're turning off transponders.
Well, that is correct. But, this is just what's available to us simple citizens. Everybody, they have radar. So they have access to radar, Florida government. And I'm not here to speak ill about Governor DeSantis. Obviously, they've done a lot, nor the AG. But just think it through logically.
Right.
That they can use telescopes, they can use radar, they can see what's going on, and they can track airplanes, all because we don't see it on flight radar. It doesn't mean that the Florida AG or some other part of the government in Florida can't figure it out. So you track the airplane, it lands at a particular location, you contact the FAA, you find out who it was, because all of that is registered, and then you go after that aircraft. Let's change the facts a little bit. Let's assume that somebody travels through Florida and they're carrying children, right? And they're doing bad stuff with children. And then they cross over and they go into an adjacent state. Are you saying that Florida has got no jurisdiction for the travel through Florida? Of course they do. But usually the feds take that and the feds will prosecute. But if they don't, Florida can. So that argument is, in my opinion, is absolute nonsense. And what it is saying is that we have no power to prevent our citizens from being poisoned. It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, because from where I'm sitting, I look at everything through the lens of the Constitution, and the Constitution is a trust indenture with the people. And so you have to ask questions like, what's a public environmental trust? And can states lawfully assert control over their airspace using a public environmental trust? And then you have to ask yourself, well, how does something like that align with the 10th Amendment? Because if the United States government is going to see to the poisoning of its own people, and the federal government thinks they have a supremacy clause that they can supersede the 10th when it comes to harming its citizens, well, I'll tell you what, the people aren't going to stand for it. So would it not make sense for the state's constitutional protections under the basis of a national resource doctrine to basically create an environmental trust for its airwaves to protect that column over the state, like as in Florida, so that if anything drifts in or is sprayed over, we actually have, there can be consequence initiated immediately. That would make it extremely painful for those people. I mean, if this is considered poison, it's manslaughter at some point, is it not?
Well, I don't think you need to get that complicated. I'm speaking as a lawyer. So are you an attorney, by the way? Because you're throwing out some pretty cool terms there, and I'm just wondering, so you've done some legal research, but are you an attorney as well?
No, I'm not an attorney. I just, unfortunately, in the work I do, you have to read a lot of case law and a lot of cases. Okay. So I just got off a Zoom call on another story I'm following closely. So yeah, it's just the nature of the beast. But thank you.
Yeah. So I think the 10th Amendment discussion is overly complex. I think that
Why?
Because it's not necessary. You don't need the 10th Amendment. If they're coming, I'm living in Florida, right?
Okay.
I'm over there in Miami somewhere, and I have a home, and somebody starts, there's some industry that starts polluting my home, meaning smoke comes over to my land from a particular industry, whatever's going on, whatever they're doing. Okay, let's assume they develop some sort of metal smelting plant, and they start contaminating the airspace in my home. I can file a lawsuit against them to prohibit them from invading in the quiet enjoyment of my land. So that's called the traditional trespass case.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the state of Florida can pursue a civil action, just like was done with the cigarette companies, right? You remember that the AG from various states, they pursued actions against the cigarette company, because ultimately they were causing injury to their citizens as a result of defrauding people relative to the nicotine content, et cetera. And people becoming addicted. Right. Okay. So the AG acted on behalf of the people. The law is already established. The law is already there. The 10th Amendment is a question between the United States government and state government. And that's not a necessary, we don't need to perform that analysis. If they're going over our land, right? If they're going over the land of Florida, and then particulate matter is falling down onto the land, into people's lungs, right? Then that is a tort in the civil context. That's an injury to people's bodies, and an action can be claimed for that. Or if they're preventing the sun from coming onto the land, and therefore crops will be affected and things of that nature, right? And a whole bunch of other things. And you're not having I assume it's the 2:30 weather half an hour shower that you're talking about that Florida doesn't experience anymore. That's
correct.
What I seem
yeah. When was the last time we saw a good thunderstorm? It's been years.
Okay. So Farmers need that. So at the end of the day, if the AG was interested, right, it's a political question. It's just a political question. By that, I mean, it's a political question. Does the AG want to start getting involved in this? That's the only question. It's very simple. In 10 minutes, I can tell an AG how it is that there would be a viable cause of action. It would take me 10 minutes. So there are viable actions that could be brought by the Florida government. It's just a question of whether they want to do that. That's it.
Okay, so if the Florida government, if the AG, Ashley Moody and Christie's in the chat, she's right. Ashley Moody has been noticeably silent. She's now running for U.S. Senate. She was appointed into that position. We haven't seen serious interest. Ron, we did get this bill done, but again, for the points we've already discussed, it's sort of a moot point. It's not effective. They're still finding the loopholes. We started with the beginning of the show with the loopholes, how they're able to get away with this. So I go back to, how do we get sort of an immediate end to what's happening? And I look at a trust structure created for creating a legal standing for citizens, because I think it could force federal disclosure and it could become a litigation vehicle, in fact. I mean, is there not an argument for that?
No, it's called cojones. You got cojones, you do it. I mean, no one wanted to put together this litigation. And
I love it.
So I'll tell you that when I started this movement, at least on my behalf, I called lawyers all over the country. No one wanted to do it. I didn't want to do it.
Why?
I already had
too big a beast, too big a Goliath to take on.
Exactly. I mean, we're civil lawyers. I don't have the military in my backyard. I do have 5 guard dogs that if you come into my house and you come into our property, they're going to take care of business. And that's, I understand there's some risk associated with this litigation. But my point is that I call people from all over the country, very successful, competent lawyers, and people didn't want to take it on. So it's a political question. I respectfully submit that you're not accurate about the Florida statute not working. They're unwilling to exercise it. That's it. They're unwilling to exercise it. And if somebody says to me that there's not geoengineering, I could prove it right now in about 3 minutes how there's geoengineering, and I don't know how much time you have. But the point is,
go for it. You have the floor. I would like my audience to get as much information out of this as possible. I think it's fascinating.
It's very simple. You see the clouds over your head. I'm sorry. You see the trails over your head with the airplanes. Okay.
Right.
That is geoengineering. Now, it's not the type of geoengineering, those clouds. It's not the type of geoengineering that you are thinking of in terms of the nefarious acts of bad people who want to put chemicals in the skies. That type of geoengineering, at a minimum, is what's called anthropogenic cloud making, or man-made clouds that are derived at a minimum. At a minimum, it comes from jet fuel from airplanes, at a minimum. So that is changing planet Earth. That is changing planet Earth, because that cloud cover that you see in those photographs prevents the temperature of the Earth from cooling down in the evening. So in the daytime, it does cause some reflection. But if you speak to climatologists and atmospheric scientists, they will tell you that at nighttime, the clouds kind of disappear, and that's why we see stars at night. And then the heat that comes from the daytime is supposed to dissipate into the atmosphere and go up because heat rises. But the heat cannot dissipate because those clouds, like you see in that formation right there, the clouds stop it and they top it so that the heat doesn't dissipate. Consequently, the geoengineering is taking place just by that. So that is a low-hanging fruit relative to geoengineering. And quite frankly, the federal government admits that that is what's going on. The federal government today will tell you, if you go to the EPA website, they will tell you that those clouds amount to geoengineering. We have citations to Lee Zeldin at the end of the lawsuit, and it addresses his commentary with regards to geoengineering. If you go to where that is cited, you'll see his video where he actually talks about geoengineering taking place just by those clouds. If you look at the website that the EPA has, they will say to you that Earth warms because of those clouds. So that's a simple one, right? I'm not talking about all the other bad stuff, okay? And what's actually in those clouds in terms of a chemical analysis. So just put that aside. Let's just assume it's the most innocuous thing, that is just water vapor. Just assume that for a minute. So
Mhm.
now the AG has enough information to know that over the state of Florida, geoengineering is taking place, and it is man-made geoengineering, and the Earth is warming. I don't know if it's in that video or in the following video. There's two videos where he's spoken, where
Okay.
this, yeah, where he.
I
I don't
can
think it's in the first video.
I can
It's
roll it for a second. Let's see what he
Concerned
says.
Americans have
It's not- it's with
urgent
Glenn Beck.
and important questions.
Sorry?
I think it's the one with Glenn Beck. This is the one where he comes out. It's about 2.5 minute video in
It's
July.
oh, okay. So let me see if I can get that. Hang on one second.
It's a pretty long one.
Is it? All right. I'm just looking for it right now. It's for Lee Zeldin.
If you go to, I think it's page 4 of the EPA where they address this issue, they actually say that geoengineering is taking place as a result of the cloud
Here it
cover.
is, the Glenn Beck podcast.
This is the bariatric gelatin bedtime recipe.
Love these commercials.
My guest today is he's in one of the biggest battles in America right now, and a lot of people aren't talking about it or really paying attention to it, but he's taking a sledgehammer to the EPA. He is the administrator of the EPA. He's also a combat veteran, so he's probably exactly the guy to take this on. He finished a very close second for the governorship of of New York in 2022. It was the best showing by a Republican there in 50 years. The left calls him a radical, of course, but he's cutting waste. He's pulling back the curtain. He is handing the power back to the American people. And when we talk power, we mean power, because he is on an energy kick that this country absolutely needs. And he also has a struggle from inside the deep state, because his own people have turned against him. But wait until you hear.
Goes for quite a while.
About 6 minutes in.
What his goal is.
Let me see if I can get it in.
Last month on the EPA website, epa.gov/geoengineering, a lot of the answers I received on this topic, and there has been government funding that's gone towards some of these efforts. There are entities and people who would want to drastically scale these activities up. I agree with you with your concern, just with the idea of playing God. The solar radiation modification, stratospheric aerosol injection, marine cloud brightening. There are these activities to make changes to the stratosphere or the lower atmosphere and try to deflect sun rays from hitting the Earth to instead send it back into space. And, in the case of stratospheric aerosol injection, you're talking about putting sulfur dioxide, a lot of it, for a long time, into the upper atmosphere, which, by the way, turns into acid rain. There are real health concerns with regards to these activities. And it's not like, it's thoroughly studied, it's approved, it's trusted, it's vetted. Instead, you have people who just want to do it on their own, like try to get themselves, someone to hand over $1 billion to just go dump a whole bunch of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. And no, that doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound right. And
I think he's right. I think we're on to something. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound right. I'm looking at the comments in the chat. Gem 133, aluminum, barium, strontium, graphene, plastic, and much, much more. This has got to stop. And so this is why the lawsuit you're bringing is one of going to be, I would assume, many lawsuits. You're just breaking barriers right now, getting discovery, and you're presenting the data from your whistleblower into the public forum of the judicial system about what exactly has been happening. And I believe this runs in tandem with what Lee Zeldin is discussing, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. Are you familiar with this company over here called Heka Cloud Inc.?
No.
Okay, so I'm in receipt of an email, and I just got this literally handed to me. So, and I haven't had a chance to upload and black out email addresses, but I'm going to read it to you. It's from Shuang Chen, a PhD, the CEO of Heka Cloud, and it was written to we'll leave that out for right now. But it says, it's very nice to meet you yesterday in the Opal meeting. As promised, attached, please find the Hecka Cloud brief for your reference in both languages. I'd appreciate your attention to its business confidential nature. And please do not forward or distribute. Let's discuss how you see the next step to move forward with our collaboration. And it's regarding geoengineering brief for Panama. So this is, given to me in the utmost of confidence, but you've got now, it looks like China involved in getting into the geoengineering game. And, who knows where else this is going to go. So it's very disturbing to see the level and the amount of countries that are involved. It's not just our country, it's other countries as well. Was it Stardust Solutions? Are they an Israeli funded company?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
put it this way: the owner of one of the creators of Stardust is an Israeli scientist, atmospheric scientist, actually,
Mhm.
and they opened up the corporation here in the United States. So where exactly they get their funding, I don't know. The scientist is Israeli, and in Israel, as I understand it, stratospheric aerosol injection is quite a sport over there. Their skies are not the same. And they have very little power, it seems, the Israeli citizens, to do anything about it. And many scientists don't want to come forward. Everybody wants that. By the way, that is that what you're looking at right there. I'm sorry to digress. I think if you go to around page 4 of that, if I remember correctly, they actually talk about how it is that the condensation trails gives rise to geoengineering. So I might be wrong if it's page 4, but it's really close to the beginning. Anyway, so Stardust is one of the really bad actors, in my opinion, that just seem to come on over with a smile. And what their intention is to put particulate matter up into the stratosphere. And, I don't know what else to say. It's nothing good about it. So
I am received some information here on Stardust. They paid Holland and Knight $260 million. And they were formed in Delaware in 2023 and moved back to Israel from the source that gave me this massive dossier of compilation of stuff. I'm going to send this to you. I'll send you the links to what I have, and I'll send you the screenshots of what I have. I'll probably send them to Andrea. She can disperse them to you and your team. But this is a worldwide effort to depopulate the planet. Would you agree?
I think it's a worldwide effort to do bad stuff. I
Okay.
have a question mark as to what the bad stuff is, whether it's. I'd rather not speculate about all that. That's a whole other conversation. It's probably the same as the vaccine conversation. Why inject us with bad stuff? But at the end of the day, I would like to stay on topic with regards to what you mentioned about China and what's going on in other countries. The answer is absolutely it's going on in China, and what's going on in China. And what they will perfectly admit to is they're engaging in what's called weather modification. So there are 3 or 4 states that in the United States that are heavy duty in weather modification. And what I mean by that is the placement of silver iodide into the atmosphere to basically form clouds and allow rain to occur. So that is called weather modification, and that's different than geoengineering. Geoengineering is when you throw the junk up to a higher place in space, right? Higher than where rain forms in what's called the stratosphere. So that's up high, about 32,000 plus, right? Let's say 32,000 to 60,000 feet. Whereas the space below that where the clouds form is called the troposphere. And that's where weather modification, to be distinguished from geo, referring to the whole world, geoengineering, the tropospheric rain clouds is what China will admit to every day. Right now in the United States, many states where are engaged in this, and what they're doing is instead of letting nature run its course, they are grabbing moisture from, let's say in Montana, from the farmers, and they're putting it where people can ski. So they want their snow to be packed so they can engage, so they can ski, right? And as I understand it, I might be engaging in a bit of hyperbole, but I talk bad again. I go to Montana and I'm talking against that. I'm in fear for my life. There is so much money invested in in rain generation in Montana that you can't talk about it. The politicians won't hear it. They're all being paid to do what it is that the ranchers want, just speaking from what I've learned. And it's very unfortunate. So that is occurring in a very significant scale in 3 or 4 states in the Midwest area, sort of near where the mountainous area is in the United States. And so that's going on. The extent of geoengineering, when they put stuff into the stratosphere in China, that I can't speak to. Most countries will not talk about it, meaning what they're actually doing. Because what is done in China does come over here. Absolutely. It stays in the atmosphere for 1 to 2 years, and it travels all around the earth. So it's a big deal.
So it's not unlike when you get a massive volcanic explosion, it sends ash 65,000 feet up into the atmosphere and it cools the earth. And we've seen that from time to time. It has been documented. And so I guess I fail to understand how the people involved in organizing geoengineering don't see the totality of what they're doing, the long-term consequences of what they're doing, because these particulates, when they're injected high enough, they stay up there long and they keep layering in more and more and more. We don't see the stars at night in Florida like we used to. I comment on it all the time. There's actually Sue Pear was in here. Christy was asking about trading weather derivatives. And now they've created a whole, you can go and trade weather derivatives on this entire, calamity. So there seems to be an entire industry growing up around this. And yet the public is the expense. We're at the expense of all of this. And it baffles my mind, Blake, how they don't see it, because they're breathing the same air you and I are.
Well, I think it's the first 5 pages of the Bible. And what else
You're
do
right.
we know? So
That's right.
They're going against the first 5 pages of the Old Testament. So
You're right.
Of Genesis. So I don't know what else to say. And I am a firm believer in letting nature do what nature's supposed to do. Let farming be as it's supposed to be. Let forests and jungles do what they're supposed to do. And if anybody has been in a hot day under a big tree, you know that you get a 20-degree temperature change when you're under a big tree, and boy, does it feel good. It's better than air conditioning. So, let nature do what it's supposed to do. Not all this cutting down trees and just chemicalizing everything. And that's what they're up to. So chemicalizing, computerizing, that's the model. That's what the future has in store. That is what I believe is relatively certain.
Well, we're getting close upon an hour here. I did want to just sort of round out this with what exists, what risks do you actually see existing to this case moving forward?
What do you mean by risks?
Well, in other words, what could stop this case from moving forward? What are the risks out there that potentially could just send this to, well, we're not going to take this any further?
Well, I'm not going to advocate for a downside towards this litigation. I'm an advocate for my client, so I'll only speak as an advocate for my client. And if I represented you or any other listener, I would just advocate for them. So that's all I'm going to do.
Fair enough. I think that's a great answer. I like that. You stay on the positive. I appreciate that. Absolutely. Well, Blake, is there anything you want to leave our audience with in terms of how they can support the efforts that you're doing? I want to bring us back to your website again so that folks can actually, if they want to, I joined. I want folks to be able to, yes. Yeah, I joined because I think it's important that we all have experience with geoengineering and we can be a part of the solution and support the fight. So go ahead and give us your spiel. We'd love to hear it.
All right, here's the spiel. So you see that little red, there's a little red bouncing arrow over there. At a minimum, just click right below there and join us. And then you will get, similar to this incredibly informative hour we just spent with you. You asked great questions. And we provide a very intense, very substantial, we provide videos free, Substack free. And our goal is to really empower this movement and get the world to understand. When we drafted this lawsuit was for the world. It's not just for Justin Mabie. It's a whistleblower case designed for everybody. So we are doing everything we can to get everybody informed. So the website is very comprehensive. You can submit information to us like you did, and with regards to, I remember yours says that how it is that what's going on in Florida is pretty undesirable for you. You can submit a case review. You can join us and we'll send you emails. You can submit photographs. If the photographs don't work, meaning if you want video and photographs and that's not plugging up to the website, which at times happens, you can send it to, just look at the website and we'll tell you where you can send it. And I look at them every day. The emails people send us, the videos people send us, their commentary, what's going on in their state. That's why I've got a pretty good handle on what's going on in the various states, what people are complaining of. And whistleblowers can contact us. People can donate. Donations essential for the movement we're doing. We're up against multi-billionaires and a movement of trying to change the world, as you've indicated in this, in your questioning, and everywhere from China to Europe to everywhere. It's very unfortunate what's taking place. But our point of view is we're not clickbait and we're not here to generate fear. We are here, similar to your question, I'm going to advocate in the form of positiveness. We are here to create a solution. We are not here to generate fear, and we're not here to have you donate out of fear or to participate out of fear. We're here to create a solution. This lawsuit was one of the first solutions. This lawsuit is not going to end it. This lawsuit exposes it. We're getting a lot of attention. People are talking to us from all over the place, and that's exactly what we want. We want people to be informed, and that's what this lawsuit does.
I think it's wonderful, and I'm glad you have stepped up to take this on. It really is. It reminds me of the Philip Morris lawsuit. You're just going up against a Goliath, and I think it's wonderful the team you've assembled, and you're taking this on, because it is at least getting this into the national conversation in a bigger way, and perhaps maybe the leaders and the powers that be around our states will stop feigning they aren't really familiar with the subject matter, but that they could have their aides look into it. No, they need to get into the fight here. They need to look up and acknowledge we have a problem. And I appreciate Representative Tim Burchett, who's openly talking about it as well. There are others out there that are talking about it. So exposure is key, but action must happen. We must follow through with punishment and consequence for those that continue to poison our skies, i.e. poisoning you and me. Blake Horwitz, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to interview you and talk to you. I think you're doing a great job. And I hope that the audience got a lot out of this today, and that you'll get a lot more people joining your website and providing documentation so that you have one hella case and for documentation for many more to come.
Great interview. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. All right, folks, that was a fantastic opportunity to speak to somebody who's in the fight. And as you heard it, he talked to many, many attorneys, and nobody wanted to come alongside. There's been a few, and we'll do more interviews with those attorneys as time permits. But really, what we talked about today isn't abstract. It's not theoretical even. This is actually really happening, and it's not happening somewhere else or to anybody else. It's actually happening in the air you breathe, the skies above your children. And the authority that sadly is governing both is allowing it to happen. So even if what is being alleged in this case is partially true, and we know it to be, I mean, come on, we've been talking about this for years, everybody out here watching this, then really what we're looking at is basically a wayward system operating without any transparency, like our government has been doing for a long time. They've been sort of running without any accountability, and clearly without the consent of you and me, because we're the governed, and we have to give these guys and women up there consent. That's where this conversation has to change. We can't sit back and wait for any of these federal agencies to investigate themselves, because they're not. We can't rely on the same institutions that are absolutely being questioned to suddenly become super transparent, because they won't. That's not how the power works. Power responds to the structure. Power responds to jurisdiction, and power responds to law. And that's why the solution isn't just the exposure. We have to reclaim our skies. We have to reclaim the authority at the state level. We have to reclaim jurisdiction over our own government, and reclaiming the legal standing of we the people. And that's exactly what a public environmental trust does, in my humble opinion. But you've got to have lawyers like Blake Horwitz who are going to attack on the other side. You've got to give them their own 5th generation warfare. You can't just take one tact. You've got to come at them in multiple angles, the same way these heathens are coming after us. All right, folks, that's about enough for today. I appreciate you joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow. We've got a big show tomorrow. I think I've got 3 different guests on. We're going to be covering a lot of ground. Just remember, you're sovereign. You, the people, are the government, and they answer to you. And what Blake and his team are doing is they're creating that sort of, they're pushing right through the chinch in their armor right now to open it up wide, expose the dirty belly of the beast. And we've got to come rushing in. We can't just let them stand there and do it on their own. We've got to be there by their side. So go ahead, hit their website and join. And to that note, I appreciate everybody's time today. God bless you all. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Food security or food sovereignty. Every time we buy food, we choose. Glyphosate exposure is exploding, And people are asking, why is food so expensive? This is why we do what we do. Organic fields, thriving orchards, the purest ingredients straight from the earth. From our farms to your family, we do the testing so you don't have to. You save time, you save money, and our regenerative farms continue to grow. It's time to remove what does not belong. Rebuild with cleaner inputs. Support the farmers with the future in mind. This isn't a trend, it's a shift. We still have a voice. We still have a choice to vote with our dollars for a healthier America today. Tap the link.
Are you ready to take your health back? At vandersteelhealth.com, I trust Purium's powerful superfoods to fuel my body with clean, plant-based nutrition. And in a world filled with toxins, Biomedic is designed to help support your body's natural detox process, even from glyphosate exposure. Real nutrition, targeted support, no junk. Go to vandersteelhealth.com and take control of your health today.